Good afternoon, and welcome to the Women in Government Talk Series Juneteenth Forum. My name is Cheryl Huggins-Salomon. I serve as the Advisory Board Chair for City and State New York, and I am the Chief Communications Officer for the NYU McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research. I hope you all had a great Juneteenth, and I want to thank you for joining us today at this webinar created in the spirit of Juneteenth. We have an exciting set of prestigious speakers lined up for you. And if the practice session that I heard is any indication, you are in for quite the discussion. So first, I want to thank our sponsor for today, Charter Communications. And now, without further ado, please welcome Camille Joseph Goldman, Group Vice President of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. She's going to start us off. Camille.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and congratulations once again for all the great work that you do at City and State and through the work you do on a day-to-day basis at NYU. My name is Camille Joseph Goldman, and I'm a Group Vice President here at Charter Communications, as many of you may know as Spectrum. I'm so proud to be a part of this panel discussion today, and I'm proud that my company, Spectrum, has sponsored this series for the second year in a row and continues to think of ways to promote and support key events such as this, showcasing our commitment to the necessity for the important dialogue. It's not lost on me that a year ago when we first started this, we highlighted the work of prominent Black women and trailblazers throughout the state for their countless work around thinking through how they were elevating the community and continuing to fight for liberty and equality, the premise of today's discussion. Today, we continue with that theme with a lineup of incredible women who are truly breaking the proverbial glass ceiling. Today's discussions and forums have as their backdrop the celebration and focus of today's series, Juneteenth. When President Biden formally signed Juneteenth into law last year, he said, in short, this day doesn't just celebrate the past, it calls for action today. Much has been written about the day over the past few weeks leading up to Juneteenth, which was actually celebrated this past Saturday and of course, recognized just yesterday as a holiday. But what I think is most relevant and significant in the meaning of the spirit of the holiday is freedom, the very principle that Juneteenth is based on. And now it's more important than ever. The freedom of speech, the freedom to live our lives as we want, no matter what color or demographic we represent. It can be as simple as sleeping safely in our homes, going to church, or even going to the grocery store. The horrific mass shooting in Buffalo a mere few weeks ago galvanized people across our state, around the country, and around the world, and put a shining light on the continuous import for the fight for racial equality. The incredible women that we have brought together today did not need Juneteenth to be sanctioned as a holiday in the furtherance of the work that they're doing and the importance of the fight every day for equality. The sanction of the holiday is not going to impede what they're working on. It has only enhanced it. And as they fight for all their constituents and they fight for all the communities they hold dear, today we laud them and their efforts. I hope you enjoyed today's discussions and our guests, and I encourage us all to learn together. With that said, our first segment is nothing short of historic. Needless to say, Hazel Dukes is a lifelong fighter for truth and justice and is the perfect person to set the tone and stage our discussion today with so many women in government and highlight the importance of Juneteenth, an important civil rights icon since the 60s and someone who's campaigned for over 50 years, fighting for the rights of so many and being the voice of so many others. Hazel Dukes is a leading figure at the NAACP and has served as the organization's state president for over 2 decades. Mama Dukes, as I love to call her, has led a distinguished career in public service and dedicates still every moment of her life, not just fighting against systemic racism, but mentoring leading and shepherding the next wave of leaders. I am humbled and honored to call her a mentor, and I remain grateful for all that she has done for people of color, women, and all those who've been marginalized across the nation. With that being said, I'd like to introduce our leader, Mama Dukes, to share some thoughts and words on the import of Juneteenth and why, now more than ever, it should be so important to so many.
Thank you so much, Camille. And let me just say how pleased I am to be joined with these other sisters, some that I know and some I don't know, but welcome to this discussion today. I'm sure each one of you bring a perspective that we all can share as we work through this time in our life. Let me say, I spent 44 years with the NAACP at every level. And yesterday, with the signing of the John Lewis bill at Medgar Evers College, I shared with the audience and with the governor that I had the privilege and the honor to work with his wife, Shirley Evers, who became the chair of the NAACP Board of Directors. But more than that, with the late Roy Wilkins, I had the privilege of attending the service for Medgar Evers and working with Al Van, Roger Green. There were former assembly persons who thought when it was time to build a college in Brooklyn that they fought hard for and named it the Medgar Evers College. And now it's a university. And then the subway that you get off there is the Medgar Evers subway. And so it was emotional for me yesterday, and to share that with another young woman who's on this panel, Shirley Paul, who is as a young woman, to be on with attorney Sheena Wright. It just warmed my heart to see, and Camille, the young women that I passed the baton to and the work they are doing. Why is it important at this stage in 2022 that we would be so ready to celebrate Juneteenth? I had the privilege to be invited to Ronald McNair School on Friday. We inducted 70 young people into the NAACP. I had an ambassador yesterday. She's 8 years old, that met the governor, and she was given a pen. It meant so much to her. She was elated at 8 years of age on Friday at her school. It's a wonderful school with so much happening for those young children there, that they were celebrating Juneteenth. They had learned about our ancestors, Adlai Sanford, who is still alive, one of our regents in education, that they have a center named Adlai Sanford that our young teachers go to learn how to be great in this profession. And some of the young sisters there, I know them personally and been a part of mentoring them. And so at this time in history where we are distraught, looking what happened to our country on January the 6th, and then the tragedies that we've had in the last month, it's so important for us to remember. And you know what? I didn't hear about shopping yesterday. I heard people said the stores were empty yesterday. People were at learning. They were at Schomburg. They were at churches. I saw our Attorney General Tish James being at a church in New Jersey yesterday. I heard that the mayor of New Jersey is naming a park after Harry Tubman. So we want our community to know, and especially our young people, that it's not the guns, it's not the bullet, it's the ballot. That we don't have to raise the guns. Let's go out and vote for men and women that sit in place of power as Camille said when we was having our practice session, that people who sit at the table that can make policies. Here we have deputy mayors. We have people from Buffalo, from Syracuse that sit at the table that look like us and know about us. That when policy is being made, they can say, oh, no, that's not good for us. And I said in the practice session that our own Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright is calling us in to talk about family, about community, how we have to live and love each other. And the more we celebrate who we are, celebrate our ancestors who gave their lives for us to be where you are today, children, to be vice president at Spectrum for Intergovernment Affairs, to make sure that when they talk about broadbanding, when they talk about internet service, you know that there are children in the housing project. They might become the next governor, the next mayor. They just need the opportunity. And you there to raise your voice and say, these children, yes, they live in NYCHA housing, but they deserve the best because they are the next physician to find the cure for cancer. It's not where they live, it's what we give to them, how we access opportunity to them. And so each one of you, Sharon Arms, Dr. Solomon, Shirley Paul, each one of you today, bring to the table your experience, your young experience. I'm the elder here, but I've been a part of your life. Your parents, your teachers, your community been a part of your life. When I hear Camille said when she goes to her mother, Carl Hasty, our speaker, lives in that community and he knows her mother by name. That's what we got to bring back. We got to bring back community. We got to bring back love and caring for those who are less fortunate than those of us who God has blessed with so much. It says, for those who have been the beneficial of the grace and the presence of those who died before us, names that we don't know, names we'll never know. We then have to pay homage to them by giving to those who in our space at this time. So I enjoyed last year. So I was pleased when they asked me to come back. I had to change some things around, but I wanted to come back because you are now sitting at the table that I made possible for you to sit. When I was at the table, I didn't have you at Spectrum. I didn't have Cheryl Wheels at New York One who tell our story. I didn't have Shirley Pauls. I didn't have Sharon Owens. I didn't have Rodriguez. But look at us now in 2022. And the same things that our ancestors went through, here we are back today. Not in the same manner. They don't wear the hoods anymore. They have on the three-piece suits, but they bold. They come into our community and look around and say, this is the place I'm going to kill the niggers. When I was in Montgomery, Alabama, I had pages torn out of my books. I had those words written, nigger. But guess what? My Sunday school teacher was the superintendent of my elementary school. And then she instilled in me that bricks and stone may break my bones, but my education would never be taken away from me. And so when I got to Delphi, when it was only 3 African Americans, Adelphi University in Garden City, I was prepared for the challenge, not to be respected, not to be asked, but I sat in the front seat. I never took a seat in the back because I was prepared to meet every challenges that was before me. And you young women today, we are prepared to wait for you, and you are meeting the challenges, and you are carrying the baton with grace, with dignity, and well prepared. And I'm so blessed to still be alive to see you preparing for the next generation. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm ready to hear from these women of wisdom, these women who are prepared to lead this nation as well as this state and these cities.
We can't thank you enough, Mama Dukes. And one thing I want to say before you go is that, and I can say this on behalf of all the women that are about to share their thoughts on this panel, is that if not for you and the work that you've done, you know, and from a very young age, we're told, if you can see it, you can be it. And you had to envision a place for all of us before it even existed. And so for the deputy mayors on the call, on the panel who are about to speak, to Shirley Paul, I want to say thank you, Mama Dukes, for not only getting us, building the table for us, getting us the chair, but also for your legacy. Because every time we enter any of those rooms, you're truly with us, your words of wisdom and the hard work that you did. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Not only on Juneteenth, but every day. And with that said, I'd like to take this opportunity. Oh, am I muted? No? Okay. With that said, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our next guest, Shirley Paul. She embodies the saying, like many of our upcoming panelists, that with much power, there's as much power behind the scenes as there is in the spotlight. Born and raised in Brooklyn to Haitian parents, my Haitian sister comes from solid roots, solid stock. And it was her community that instilled in her the value of serving her community. And she's dedicated her life simply in the furtherance of that goal, both as a senior advisor to the first female governor of New York State. She plays a critical and crucial role in molding public policy. Prior to doing this in the governor's office, she served as assistant director for legislative affairs at SUNY, and she's worked hand in glove with Governor Hochul, who was then lieutenant governor, for many years in the furtherance of the very issues that we're going to talk about today. She's an outright star, and we're just humbled and honored to have her here as part of the conversation. So with that said, welcome, Shirley Paul.
Thank you so much, Camille. Thank you. Thank you. An amazing welcome. I just want to take the time to also give thanks to Dr. Hazel Mama Dukes, who not only, as you said, continues to do the work, but she continues to lift as she rises, because since she's known me, she's taken me on as if she's known me for a lifetime. And there are so many people that have poured into me. I'm blessed to be on this panel with you. I remember seeing you come through to my political club and just being so impressed that you were, involved in politics and in campaigning. And again, I hadn't seen too many people that look like me doing that. To the amazing deputy mayors that are on this call, Owens, Rodriguez, Dabney, and Wright, I'm privileged to be here with you too. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Well, thank you. And I want to say this honestly, because you're right. We've known each other for a few years now. And before you've had the title, you've had the mission. And I wanted you to give an update to those on the call. Because now you are in a unique position, working alongside our first female governor. And as someone who, again, has always seen the mission and always understood the mission, no matter what title you've had, what have you learned through your current positioning? What have you learned from the governor? And what has enabled you to carve out so much and lead in your own right?
That's a very good question. I will say, I'll mimic your words in always seeing the mission. That's what really has driven me, just my faith, my love of wanting to help people, because when I started getting involved in the local TJ club in my district, I didn't even really have a full sense of New York politics, but I knew I wanted to help. I knew I wanted to get involved. And through those experiences, being committed, not concerned about the role, the title, but just happy to be there, because that's where I learned most of what I have. And that came at no cost, often at no real cost, to the people that was teaching me, other than giving it away, volunteering. Through that same faith and commitment is what allowed me to cross over and start working for the governor when she was our then lieutenant governor. When I think of what I learned from her, one of the biggest things is her work ethic, her love for community service, her love for the public life, and balancing that and still being a mom, being a daughter, being now a grandmother, having those real human calls while she's in the middle of making a big decision. So that encouraged me to see that, women you can have it all. It comes at a price. You have to work hard, but I'll say that's what I took from her. But through all my years, I'll say what I learned in the courtroom, what I learned in law school, what I learned working under greats like Bernie Katcher and all these other folks, now give me the eyes to think quickly and know what I'm looking for despite what's happening, and always committed to the mission regardless, because Lord knows we were not going to get here, but I am blessed to work alongside, be a part of a historic administration, and working with a governor that really cares, and that wants to see me grow in the process of furthering her agenda.
Like many of the panelists today, leaders that are willing to both uplift, particularly women of color, and invest in their leadership, as the kids would say, can say less to me. You've got me. It is inspiring and it is so important. Yeah. And I've worked in government, but unlike the ladies on this call, I have not worked in government at such a crucial time. We're in the midst of a pandemic. There are so many social norms that are being challenged and so many movements that are at the forefront. And as a woman of color, on the heels of Juneteenth, what has this meant for you and your position now? Arguably, you've said you're working with a great leader and a woman who understands kind of the issues that you're facing and you're dealing with and the state is facing. But as a woman of color, Shirley, how are you dealing with these issues? On the heels of Juneteenth, how are you dealing with the unfortunate, disproportionate challenges that women of color often face in these roles? And how are you tending to constituencies that are similarly positioned?
I think, so let's take this a little bit, break it down a little bit. I think when I think of Juneteenth, I'm so proud that we are celebrating this nationally. And I think what it reminds me of is a lack of communication and action. There was a lack of communication that kept folks enslaved much longer than they had to be because the law had changed. But more than them just hearing about it, there wasn't any action to reflect that they were free. There weren't any obvious support services or anything to acclimate them into a society coming from where they came from. I think, often it's discounted what a life was like to be enslaved, and then just like this, for that to be changed with no real support system that will allow for sustainable development. So when I fast forward that now and see my role, I think it's important, just as, what's been the theme here is the experiences and what we bring. Because now when it comes to constituency groups, I also manage the state's constituency team that has portfolios ranging from African-American affairs, faith, to Jewish, to women, all of that. And what I see is it gives those representatives, including me, a chance to highlight what's happening in those communities through our lenses. Doesn't necessarily mean I live that same lifestyle, but I'm aware of what's happening to Black women when they get pregnant. Yes, there's an excitement that there's a baby coming, but then it can also be terrifying because will I live? Will I be here to see this baby? Because those are some of our realities. Campaigning, I saw gross food insecurity, even in a developing a middle-class community. So when I see all these issues, it allows me to flag them. It allows me to, by raising those issues, because the blessing in us being there is to raise these issues. And of course, we hope they land well, where there can be some action that follows it, but it has people thinking in a different way. If I put in this policy, what effects does it have when it's really applied? How does it affect different communities, in particular mine? So I think that's the privilege that I have, that we all have here. And we know that's challenging. When Dr. Dukes talked about having that voice at the table, I think for us as Black women and Black men too, in these spaces, yes, we're in there. Now, are we in the room and it's just, on its face, we're checked off, we're here, or are we listened to, and sometimes that takes a little time. And I'm okay with that, because I also recognized how entrenched a lot of the situations we are in, how entrenched they are, our policies, different kinds of leadership and things like that. So the thing for me is to keep chipping away at the block. When it really touched me when Dr. Duke said, when she was doing all this fight, there weren't even, and she just named 4 or 5 of us here, but that's what it's for. It's, do I want things to be better and greater? Do I believe they will be better and greater tomorrow? Not necessarily, not everywhere, but I know if I keep working at it and you all keep working at it, those that come later on will have a better opportunity. Think about the people that, came before us. If they had said, well, I'm not going to benefit, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you at the TJ Club. You're running citywide campaigns as a young Black woman. So I think we always have to think of the mission outside of ourselves. And also, how does that impact our counterparts in other communities of color? Because we all are fighting for the same thing, So I think at this moment, it's really making that connection. Again, communication and action. For example, some of the issues that I just raised that are pertinent here in this state, they're followed by good sense policy to fix them. So that's what we're here for. And I'll continue to do that fight. I pray that God always gives me the strength, the mindset, the wisdom to do it, and just the partnership. But seeing all of you, now I'm dreaming bigger, So I'm just excited to be here.
Thank you. And you are such an impactful leader with a powerful voice. But something that you said really struck a chord with me, and I just wanted to follow up before I let you go. Because you said, are we listened to? All right. And I think, as we embrace Juneteenth and the spirit behind it and freedom, are folks still hearing us? You mentioned also, infant mortality rates and African-American women when they get pregnant. And it all reads and connects to studies that show that disproportionately Black women aren't listened to in very unique ways when it comes to their threshold on pain, when it comes to their concerns about their healthcare, their community. There are studies and statistics, and there was a very good New York Times article that came out not too long ago, that while, to quote Mama Dukes, it's about the ballot, right? The power of the ballot. We lead and we triumph disproportionately in any state by demographic. We vote in volumes. We dictate in many ways leadership in so many different ways and so many different roles. But sometimes we're not listened to. And as impactful as you are, Shirley, and as powerful as your voice is, what is your advice for those who are watching this, who are like, you know what, I want to be like Shirley Paul one day. I want to be a senior advisor to the governor, but I'm feeling like I'm not being listened to. I'm not getting the momentum that I want. What's some advice that you could give to them, particularly to African-American women, as they're grappling with so many of the issues that we just mentioned and so many issues that you just highlighted, so that they can also see success?
Right. I think the more we show up and say it and are crafty, by that I mean, being prepared, always showing up with a degree of flexibility to balance things out, to negotiate. But being prepared is key, because when you show up, you never know what day your voice, you're really going to land that shot that you've been looking for. So that's one. And not to be discouraged. Even if you are being listened to, all your ideas, it's almost unreasonable to think everything you can say can land exactly where you want it to. But what I have recognized is that we're here, and we matter, we should be here. So I want to say to younger women or any woman who is thinking about getting involved in politics or in roles of leadership, you matter. And not just because, while it shouldn't matter just because you're a woman or just because you're Black, but it's important. You bring something different and you show up there, you smile, you look beautiful, you work hard. So I think it matters. And I think part of it is really being persistent and being resilient. If I ran for office last year, and I wanted it, and I especially wanted it because we had never been represented in this community in the council by a woman or by a Black person or any person of color in a majority people of color district. But I wasn't deterred by the fact that I didn't have that victory, because I asked God to allow me to represent 170 something thousand people. Now I get to be part of a team that impacts over 20 million New Yorkers. So you got to stay in the game. To play, you got to stay in the game, and you get better. You take advantage of opportunities. The money's good. You want to be glitzy and go after the money, but experience is invaluable. So I just say, look, that's where I met you, probably stuffing envelopes, So I just say, be encouraged, keep going, and know that one time what you say lands, it will change somebody's life. It can have an impact, but you showing up is a big deal enough for other people. So show up proud. So I'm just proud to be a part of this. And I look forward to continuing to give my life to public service. And just helping people.
Well, as we transition to our panel with the deputy mayors, let me tell you, Shirley, we are so grateful, inspired by your faith, and moved by your mission. And I want to say thank you, not just today, but every day, not just Juneteenth, but I'm lauding your efforts all the time. Thank you for the candor that you shared today and how you continue to help so many people across the state.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you, everyone.
And with that said, I'd like us to transition to our last segment this afternoon, which is going to be more of a roundtable discussion featuring an incredible group of women, which has been the theme of today anyway, who serve as deputy mayors in impactful and powerful administrations throughout the state. You'll get to know a bit more about them, the work that they're doing, and their mission, as well as what Juneteenth means to them. I'm grateful for their service, for their inspiration. As someone who's gotten to meet some and is just getting to know others, I want to thank them for the representation and that the fight that they bring to their jobs every single day. Because if not for the work that they're doing and all the rooms that they occupy, none of us would ever be seen, and we should all be eternally grateful. With that said, today we have from New York City, Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright. We have from Buffalo, Deputy Mayor Crystal Rodriguez-Dabney. And from Syracuse, we have Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens. Welcome, Deputy Mayors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I think I'm going to open up this discussion with a question for all of you. And I think right now, there's a lot to be said about kind of the great political power around some of the construct of offices and leadership in New York State. From Buffalo, New York to New York City, we have African-American mayors. We have an African-American attorney general. We have a leader in the Senate and a leader in the Assembly that speaks to that very same descriptive representation. And now, by your mere presence, we have women of color in key positions in almost every corner of the state, thinking through how they're making this a better society for us all. And so for each of you, I think everyone's curious, honestly, what is it like being a woman and a woman of color in these spaces of power and influence? What are some of the challenges you face? And while I can speak to this without even knowing you, but let everyone know, let the choir know how you are creating opportunities for the next generation of leaders. And with that, maybe we'll start with Deputy Mayor Owens.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure. And I was sitting there listening to Dr. Dukes, and we bid her a hello from her good friends here in Syracuse for our NAACP chapter. It really is a privilege. It is hard work, make no bones about it. And I'm sure the other ladies will agree, particularly when I took this job, it was, and Camille, I am going to create a poster in my office, and I'm going to give you credit for it. And it is going to say, before you have the title, have the mission. Because I know every single one of these ladies that are speaking and are going to speak, we were about the work before anybody ever came and talked to us about a title. And I'm the first to say, thank you for recognizing me as deputy mayor, but my name is Sharon. And many people say to me, understand that that title is not just for you. It does not just involve you. It is really about all of us that look to what you're doing. It is the influence, and we wouldn't be in the positions we're in if we were not respected by the mayors that occupy the officers in our city. And speaking for myself, it is that respect that gives. What I appreciate is the influence, the perspective that we all bring, not only as Black people, but as Black women. So many times in a conversation around policy, about initiative, I will find myself having a conversation, well-intended conversations. I wouldn't work with people that I didn't feel had the best interests of all of the city of Syracuse residents. But my experience and my Sharon brain hears certain words or hears certain, and I ask why, and I ask, what's the purpose, and what is the ultimate intention? And when the mayor has, I am so thankful that when he has to make a pretty tough decision, he will ask the senior team, of which I'm a member of, but then turn and say, what do you think, Sharon? And I just tell him like it is. He knew that when we knew each other before he became mayor, so he knows that's what he's gonna get from me. And so many times he will say, thank you. You made up my mind for me.
Thank you. And I'm sure so many folks can relate, but particularly our panelists. And so with that being said, Deputy Mayor Wright, would you like to and again, Deputy Mayor Owens, I hear you. I know you're Sharon. And again, I'll be the first to admit the title doesn't make the person. And each of you have been called to a vision and a duty that predates your current positioning, right? But I also want to say, for those who are watching, saying deputy mayor and having a Black woman respond is also powerful. So please allow me that for today. With that being said, Deputy Mayor Wright, would you like to also respond to the question?
No, absolutely. And I wanna follow up on that specific comment, because like my sister Sharon, we're always so focused on the work, right? We're doing the work, we're getting the work done. And one of the things I think I've had to learn in these 6 months on the job is that there's power in that title. And we got to lean into that because there hasn't been people quite like us yielding and holding these titles. And we have to use that for the work, to advance the work. Often I'm just used to kind of, being in the background. I'll fall back, or people say, oh, can you come and speak to say, oh, no, I don't need to do that. But then I really appreciate that, but I need to. One, because we need to see each other, but also it helps get the work done. And so when you say, well, how's it been? Like my sister Sharon, it is, I say it's been exhilarating and exhausting, right? Exhilarating and exhausting. And it's really an awesome responsibility. When you think about, someone said to me, you all now have the reins and the resources. When you talked about all of those people in position and power, right? This is what my Dukes dreamed of, and other ancestors and people that came. This is what they created the way for. And it's an awesome responsibility. And I feel that, right? That sense of urgency, that we've got a moment in history to do big things. And shame on us if we don't get done as much as we can get done in the time that we have, because it's a moment. And so that's how it feels. And I think the other part of your question, Camille, is like, how are we creating opportunities for others? So I had the distinct honor and privilege to serve as the chair of the transition for the Adams administration. And I'm very happy that we have 5 women deputy mayors, and many diverse leaders across the administration, leading agencies and mayor's offices, et cetera. And that to continue the work, one of the things that we are doing is looking at pay equity. No surprise, right? Women, Black people, women of color, all of the challenges that we have, and that there are things now in these roles that we have, and this is just in New York City government, right? There's these disparities. We can fix that. And so making sure that equity, we have a newly created Mayor's Office of Equity, is central to everything we do. Because we can't have the second mayor of color in the history of the city of New York and not be able to look back and see how we meaningfully and measurably move the needle for Black people and people of color in this city. And that's what we are urgently focused on as we move forward.
Thank you so much. And before we go to Deputy Mayor Rodriguez Dabney, one thing I want to say, Deputy Mayor Wright, is, you said something that really stuck with me. You said you almost stepped into the screen, like you feel that responsibility. And I think all of you should be lauded, because many people would crumble. I can't, that responsibility is as much a gift as it can be a challenge, considering the climate in which you are trying to do the good business. You are trying to administer these services to the public. You guys aren't shuddering because of it. You're not stepping back. You literally are stepping into it. And for that, we are grateful. And with that, Deputy Mayor Rodriguez Dabney, please share your thoughts in candor.
Sure. If you'd indulge me a moment, I just want to say how much Dr. Duke's talk inspired me. It made me think about my grandmother. I'm blessed to have both of my grandmothers still with me, one of which journeyed from a small town outside of Selma, Alabama to Buffalo in 1954. She had a 3rd grade education, and she always said she wanted each one of her children and her grandchildren to do better than she did. And she worked hard. She was a single mom, and came up here with no family. And she got to sit at my son's graduation not too long ago and said, with a 3rd grade education, I never could imagine seeing my granddaughter graduate from law school and now seeing my great grandson graduate from college. So Dr. Dukes, you reminded me of her pushing me and her testimony. And lastly, to further indulge me, I just want to send a special shout out and thank you to Shirley Paul. I met Shirley recently. Immediately, her smile connected me to her. She came here, and when I tell you, came to Buffalo to help our community in light of what just happened here, 514. And she's been on the ground several times, genuinely connecting with the community, genuinely being supportive. I felt the sisterhood immediately. And with that, I've been on the job now for, I think, a little over 70 days, and it has been tough. The mayor asked me over the weekend, though, he said, if in talking to you and offering you this job, if I told you what was to come in your first 90 days, would you have said no? And I said, wow, that's a deep question. And I said, I don't think I would. The work that is to be done, the tragedy, I don't think anybody would have ever asked for it. I know no one would have asked for it, but the work is hard. Like Deputy Mayor Owen said, it's not easy. And what Deputy Mayor Wright said, I don't think any of us run towards the camera. It's the behind the scenes work. It's getting everything set up for our mayors. It's making sure that the communities feel connected and feel heard. It's tough work, but the verse, and I know we get it mixed up, but too much is given, much is required, right? And so I don't think that I would have said no. But what happened 5/14 here in Buffalo, New York, brought to light some of the work, and it sort of accelerated the work already that the mayor wanted to be done, especially from an equity perspective, especially from our Office of Equity and looking at marginalized communities. Oftentimes I am at a table full of people and none of them look like me. There may be people of color in the room, but it's not always women in the room, right? And how often do we go into a space and you're not quite sure what it is you want to say? How is it that I want to get a point across, but I want to appear not to be too assertive? Because if I'm assertive, right, that might mean they might label me something else. Where if my male counterpart was just as assertive as me, right, he's applauded. So, dealing with those, navigating that, but how, to go into your other question and creating opportunities for the next generation, I can tell you, I do not want to be old and not have lifted as I climbed. And that's important to me. I want to be able to let people know that in my community, I was a teenage mom. I was able to go to the military. I come from East Buffalo. We're trying to change the narrative and not call it the East Side, so it's excluded. We're trying to bring everybody in and say East Buffalo, but encouraging people and let them know that those things don't have to limit you. Those things don't have to stop you. You don't have to stop at a certain point. I went to get 2 law degrees. Everyone in my family said I was crazy, but I did. And it was hard. It was nothing. There's not been an easy part of this journey here to this seat. So I am honored to sit in it. I am humbled that the mayor asked me. And like Sharon says, when he looks at me, I am almost in awe when he says, "What do you think?" And I bring a lens and a perspective to this chair that hasn't sat in it yet. And that's from a Black woman.
Thank you so much. Well, first and foremost, let me just say, I know I mentioned it in my comments, but throughout the state, I think each deputy mayor could speak to the violence that they've had to witness, both in the positions they're occupying, but as well just by and large, just being present. But what happened in Buffalo was truly traumatic on so many different levels. And I do want to say that the work the leadership team has done on the ground in Buffalo is truly terrific. And the work that your administration has done. When it first happened, I know that, Charter Communications is the parent company of Spectrum News. And we did a lot of work in the community and did a lot of work with the mayor. And one of the mayor said on the special that we ran on the incident, I thought was powerful and speaks to exactly why you are so well positioned, is that you never want a tragedy like this to befall anyone, anywhere, at any time, right? Mm-hmm. But he could not have been more prideful and more invested in the leadership he had in the city to rise to the occasion, right? And so I want to thank you and the mayor for that. But that being said, I think it's a good opportunity because Deputy Mayor Owens, a lot of your work before you've occupied this seat in Syracuse dealt with gun violence, right? Dealt with the community work. You were a fierce advocate at a time when, while it's unfortunate that these larger instances of violence grab attention, right? The truth of the matter is you were tasked with shining the spotlight, right?
Yep.
When no one else wanted to really see it or acknowledge it, right? And so I'm curious about how your work as an advocate, right, has made you more purposeful as a deputy mayor, as you transition to government, again, still always about the mission, always about the mission. But now that you're here as deputy mayor, how is that, over 30 years of work informed what you're presently pursuing?
Absolutely. as a CEO prior to coming back to city government, I said I wasn't coming back again, but somehow I was drawn back again for another administration. But as being in one of the largest community centers, neighborhood based community centers as its CEO, we were in the crux of every ill that beset Black people in the city of Syracuse. And the difference is, from a perspective in this seat, is really looking at systems and really looking at policies and really trying to help community members transition from, they're all hurting. Community centers like public safety never shut down during the pandemic. They couldn't maintain their staff, their facilities were really run down during the time. And so providing them with resources to be very specific about assisting them, but helping people to understand that providing you with dollars that are going to be done in 12 months, for example, is not going to create the systematic change that needs to happen that prevents people from falling through cracks. Without question, having the on-the-ground perspective for over 30 years, I understand the psychological and the socioeconomic and the poverty. And Syracuse is #1 in this nation for childhood poverty, children under 18 in the entire United States. And so understanding how that impacts families and the residual effect on children and their needing resources to be able to eat and live and keep clothes on their body, and having the empathy and understanding that perspective in this seat with the challenge and absolute need of public safety in the city, and being able to ensure that neighbors are safe and neighborhoods are safe, and the same neighborhoods that are over policed are the same neighborhoods that are being victimized and completely overrun by criminal activity. And so it really is the shift in the transition to helping people understand what are the systems that can be created, and how do you tactfully let community-based organizations know that $2 million is better suited not in $50,000 micro amounts to agencies, but really in creating a system that includes them, which has been the perspectives that many of us will bring, is that those standard organizations that get dollars repeatedly, no, let's begin to bring in grassroots organizations who may need capacity building, but really are the on-the-ground experts and really pushing that envelope. And I'll end with this, the perspective of Crystal talked about it being the only person in the room. Upstate New York is a whole different monster than downstate. And so upstate New York, there is nobody else that looks like us many times in any of those rooms. And so we have to get past, and I think we're in a position to answer that call to no longer be worried about whether or not somebody's going to think we're the angry Black woman or the over-aggressive individual. We just tell it like it is and we do the work. Our work speaks for itself and who we are.
Thank you for that. And I think, well, there's so many impactful statements. I want to say one thing that really stuck out was, you know, a lot of you have either now or have been the first in so many ways. We're going to get to Deputy Mayor right in a moment, who's like the first female president and CEO of the United Way. So you're used to being titled in a manner that speaks to a benchmark, a landmark. Right? So one thing you mentioned, though, that Syracuse is known for something that you don't necessarily want to be the first in, right? And how does that stigmatize people? As someone, I'm from the Bronx, born and raised, and growing up, I was always told, like, this is the poorest borough in the nation, you know? And it is humbling to understand that how you describe a community and how you affiliate some of these monikers, right, and some of these benchmarks to the community, how it impacts the youth or the people living there. But what's even more powerful is that there's someone in government, particularly in Syracuse, that gets it, right? And that's always what's been lacking. The variables have always been there, right? But the culturally competent lens to understand them is often lacking. That being said, speaking of cultural competency, Deputy Mayor writes, as I mentioned before, you were the first woman to run the CEO of United Way. You also ran and were president of the Abyssinian Development Corporation. You have had a remarkable history of being entrenched in issues that were not just social, but economic. And as you think through the current issues facing New York City, the need for public-private partnership, again, similar to Deputy Mayor Owens, how has that informed your approach? And what are some things that you are seeking in New York City, that you're seeking through the administration, that's a direct result or an extension of what you've done to this point?
Thank you for the question. And, economic opportunity and economic mobility is so core and central to everything for us as Black people, right? Being enslaved and having our labor stolen, in addition to all of the other kind of atrocities, and really being cut out of the economy of this country for centuries, really is a big root of the health challenges, of the justice involvement, of our educational challenges. It's a root. And I think when we think back on the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King and Ma Dukes, Malcolm X, they were talking about economic empowerment. And so as we sit here, right, and as I sit here in New York City, and just a couple of statistics, so this is what we're really squarely focused on. As we walked into this administration, Black unemployment was over 15%, double the next layer or level. Black people represent 22% of the New York City population, and only 3.5% of the businesses in New York City are Black owned. 3.5%. And we account for 50% of the population at Rikers, 50% of the population more than under the Department of Probation. And New York City's contracting with Black owned businesses is about 2.8%. So as we talk about, and Mayor Adams talks a lot about going upstream, right? We're picking people up downstream and saying, okay, we need access to benefits and, supportive housing and, all of these kind of remedies for root wrongs that have been perpetrated in our community. And so when we think about our time in these seats and in this season, we've got to be very squarely focused on how are we moving the needle on those data points. Juneteenth is about, to me, it's about freedom. But it's about opportunity and righting the wrongs. And so that economic mobility, economic opportunity is something that is very important for us to do and lead and lean into and drive.
And thank you. I think bringing that issue to the forefront, right, can help to stem and deal with so many of the other issues that were raised by so many today, because it's interconnected. I know we only have a little bit of time. I have two more questions. I want to ask one question of Deputy Mayor Rodriguez-Dabney, and then I'll have one final question for all of you, if you'll indulge me. One thing I found interesting, and I think Deputy Mayor Owens said it before, she was like, I don't know if I wanted to come back to government. But Deputy Mayor Rodriguez-Dabney, you did just that. You were working for Mayor Byron Brown. Most recently, I think that you were working as a Chief Diversity Officer at I think, Buffalo State College. And so you have if now more than ever, when you think about diversity and inclusion issues, right? You think about what's facing those that are marginalized. Was that what incentivized you to return? Because I have to say, something that you mentioned earlier, like, you said, seeing this through the lens of a Black woman, right? Seeing these issues, and so many studies, and this is just for women generally, so many studies show that through a woman's lens, so many visions are realized, not just for women, not just for women of color, but for the entire community, right? Because we are able to understand unique inequities, macro and micro in a way that is so unique based on the burdens that we carry. So I'm curious, what made you return at a time such as this, not even to get biblical, but at a time such as this, what incentivized you?
And I joke with him, the mayor had sent me a bottle of wine to congratulate me on an award. And I think he asked me to come back when he knew I was enjoying that bottle of wine. Just by way of background, I think people should understand, I was in law school here in Buffalo, and Mayor Brown was a state senator at that time, and he was running for mayor. And I have to be honest, my perspective was Buffalo's not going to elect a Black mayor. He is our first Black mayor. I met him when he was on the campaign trail. He and I engaged in a conversation. I told him I was born and raised in Buffalo. I'm in law school. He said, send me your resume. I sent him my resume. I didn't think anything would come out of that because I just knew Buffalo was not going to elect a Black mayor. Lo and behold, he won. He called, and I started with him as his executive assistant. So I handled his schedule. I took the bar, I failed. He was motivating me. And then I went up to the head of the Civil Rights and Human Rights Division. After that, he promoted me and created the Chief Diversity Officer position. So I began as the City of Buffalo's first Chief Diversity Officer, and I left. I left City Hall feeling like I had escaped. So it's almost like a Godfather movie. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in, right? And being able to leave, work as chief of staff to the president at Buffalo State, but then also work as the chief diversity officer, being trained in equity and diversity, it brings a different perspective. I was able to step outside of, I'm not going to say outside of politics, because although I was naive and thought that in higher education there was no politics, there was, but I got to see a different perspective. And then when he asked if I would come back, to me, again, having struggled to make my way out of the inner city and dealt with the challenges, I almost felt like I had no choice. Again, giving back to the community, that sort of lifted me up. But that was one of the things that we discussed, is looking at policy through an equity lens, right? So if you're looking at one community and you know that they have started here and you're looking at this community, well, what's going to bring that community up? Right? And it's equity. It's not equality. And that has been a challenge here for so many people, even people who consider themselves to be allies. It's not about equality. Equal is going to keep us here and continue. We're just going to keep going up and we're still going to be behind. It's like running a 400-yard dash and you start 200 yards ahead of me. Right? So that was one of the things, but also to our relationship, his mentorship, seeing one of the things that he says about it, he says, you just are so high energy and you just do not give up and you don't take no for an answer. I mean, my mantra is the worst they could do is tell me no, but I'm just going to find a way around it. But that's how I got out of the inner city. That's how I fought through education and through the military. So in looking, I love the city of Buffalo. We have come so far. There's so much further to go. And so for me, when I said yes, it was after contemplation, but looking at the experience that I gained in higher education and being able to bring that back and make my city better and help connect with communities so I can make those communities better.
Thank you. And I think it's so important for folks to hear, Rome wasn't created in one day, right? And I think it's helpful for folks to understand that while each of you are seated in such powerful positions, it took a lot of hard work, sweat equity, and by your own admission, Deputy Mayor Rodriguez-Dabney, which I'm sure the other deputy mayors would agree with, mentorship and leadership of good mayors. And so before we end, I'll ask one lightning round question, if you'll indulge me. This time next year, if you enjoyed this experience and you're willing to come back and have a similar conversation, what is the one thing either you are personally or through your jobs or your roles going to focus on so that next year when we're discussing Juneteenth and next year we're talking about the year that transpired, you're like, you know what, things aren't where it needs to be. It's not exactly as we envisioned, but this is how we made it a little better this last year. And we can start with Deputy Mayor Owens.
Thank you, and please invite me back. It's amazing, and I definitely want to reach out to these sisters and formalize, because no one understands what we do other than us. And so a year from now, I'm going to be leaning into our community violence intervention efforts here. Police have their police suppression methods. I want to really bring our community violence intervention efforts together. And be in the place based on my experience where the city can take a lead on it and really create a safety net of these great people that are on the ground doing intervention work, doing that work needed to intervene and stop the violence, because it really impacts every other aspect of what we're talking about. Economic security for people, the ability for investment in your town, just safe places for people to live.
Amen to that. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Wright?
I too just want to say to my sisters, Sharon and Crystal, and I see you, Soror, Crystal, lifting as we climb, that we will absolutely connect. We are now connected. And in that connection, I would say a year from now as well, really looking at violence in our communities. I've just been named co-chair of a gun violence task force here at the city, along with one of the leaders of our crisis management system here on the front lines in the city of New York. And so really looking at that holistic approach, but also, as Sister Sharon said, building the capacity of our credible institutions that are on the ground, that are standing in the gap, to ensure that they can do what we need them to do is going to be a big priority. And in a year's time, we will necessarily have made significant progress.
Agreed. Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Rodriguez-Dabney?
So I think next Juneteenth, right? Shirley touched on it. The beautiful thing about, well, the interesting thing historically, when the troops rode into Texas, it wasn't just an automatic jubilee and a celebration, right? They let them know legally you are free, but there still was a fight, right? People didn't want to, slave owners didn't want to let the slaves go. They didn't want to let them be free. So there still was a fight. And I hope that this time next year, I can come back and share with you the fight. And share with you the healing that as a city we have experienced. I'm not going to be able to come back, and I hope you invite me back also with my sisters in government, but it won't be healed. But I hope to be able to talk to you about the progress that we have made on in East Buffalo. I hope to talk to you about the healing. And then I hope to ask for your help and guidance in terms of how we move forward and continue in that healing, not just from 514, but from generational things that we have dealt with as communities of color.
I agree. And I want to thank you all for all you're adding to that progress and to the process you're driving. And let me say before we close out, in addition to thanking city and state, Mama Dukes, Dr. Dukes, Shirley Paul, and all the deputy mayors, I do want to take one point of privilege to say that Charter Communications, through my job, I've had the opportunity to visit and work with the mayors throughout the state and throughout my region here on the East Coast. And one thing that always stuck out to me, whether it was in Buffalo or Syracuse or in New York City, that they were strong, competent, and leading Black women in each of these offices. And I'm happy today that you guys were able to connect and start a candor around the work that you're all doing daily and the furtherance of the greater good. So with that said, I want to thank you for the opportunity to facilitate this conversation. I want to thank City and State for bringing us all here together. I look forward to the next conversation. This is a series, and we're hoping to bring more women next month to have and tackle similar topics. And I want to say, I hope if you haven't already, I hope everyone has the opportunity to reflect on Juneteenth and what is meant to them. With that, Cheryl, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Camille. Congratulations on a great webinar. And I want to thank all of the speakers and panelists for sharing their wisdom today. This was amazing. And to everyone who joined us today, thank you as well. And thank you to Charter Communications for helping us to hold this event. We hope you all enjoyed the conversation and feel inspired to continue in the spirit of Juneteenth. As Camille said, I'm Cheryl Huggins Salomon. Please enjoy the rest of your day.